Oh, or I mean, or the exact opposite of that happened, where America threw an atom bomb too, just the second one, just to test it out, and to flex on Russia and show the USSR that we had multiple of these, and then turned around and protected Unit 731 that committed these war crimes, and then used some of the germ warfare research that they actually took from Unit 731 in the Korean War. I'm talking about the anthrax letter attacks.
Solved, but not closed. That's the word from officials looking into the 2001 anthrax attacks 8 days after the FBI's top suspect committed suicide.
On September 11th, 2001, the United States endured the deadliest terrorist attack in its history, leaving every citizen in a state of disbelief and despair. This attack displayed American vulnerability and established a sense of uncertainty within the nation. In spite of the growing fear and grief, millions came together to rebuild not just what was taken, but the very heart of the American people. Further attacks were anticipated, but it was unclear when or where they would occur, and what form they would take. Unbeknownst to the public, another deadly plan was unfolding with the intention of harming America's people. And
you cannot stop us. We have this anthrax. You die now. Are you afraid? Death to America, death to Israel. Allah is great.
Another deadly plan was unfolding with the intention of harming America's people and adding to the widespread hysteria. Overshadowed by a more visceral and chaotic national tragedy, this scheme would be all but forgotten if it wasn't for the distinct weapon used to sow chaos: anthrax.
You're a parent Marxist here. Can you remind me what I'm watching? You're watching the chat to see that you can no longer communicate for one day. Because there's nothing more fucking annoying than a chatter who thinks that we are having a one-on-one conversation when there's 25,000 people in here. Okay? Don't give a fuck if you've been a subscriber for 17 months. Like, you know, I despise it, okay? You're being rude to everybody else. For the record, if you weren't here earlier, that was the guy who was like, why the fuck are we watching this bullshit when we should be covering things that, that pertain to workers' lives? And then, now he comes back because he didn't get enough juice because of the one-on-one conversation. And he was like, can we talk about things actually affecting the working class? What are you watching, ... Now, I made fun of him in a lighthearted way. Now he's back for more because he's sipping on that dumb juice. Okay? Now he's like, what are we watching again? I'm like, okay, well, you're done for the day. 24 hours. Be quiet.
Odorless, colorless, and tasteless. An invisible organism capable of sending a strong message. If a weaponized biological agent were to be released in mass, the aftermath would rival that of a nuclear.
Love our annual masterclass on why we deserve this. I mean, this year I didn't even go extra hard. I think I was very reserved this year. I've gone way harder in years prior. And no, I don't even mean like when I said America deserved 9/11. I think the 20th anniversary and the Afghan pullout was when I went the nuttiest. Like, I went fucking bananas mode, okay? I lost my shit. I was like, fuck you. Everyone suck my dick. I was so right. All these dumb motherfuckers were wrong. Not that it matters because, like, people are so stupid. Like, my fucking haters are so dumb, dude. I do not have smart haters, okay? I have the dumbest haters, which in many instances actually causes like a different, unique problem where like they're too stupid. Like they don't even hate on the right thing. Like that fucking thumb guy. I just remembered that thumb guy, the fucking pronouns guy. He was like still tweeting. He was still tweeting about me a couple days prior, I guess. I never even saw it. And he, like, thought I was the Surfs account or something. I guess the Surfs blocked him on Twitter. So he was, like, posting about how, like, I guess I've made Hasan very mad with my brilliant words. in fucking pronouns because he fucking blocked me. And it's like, and I looked at it and I was like, well, this is not my account. Like, what are you talking about? In my mind, I was like, what the fuck's going on? But he's dumb and I love him for it. But what blew my fucking mind was that not a single person in the comments in his fan base actually pointed out that that wasn't me. Some were adding my fucking account at Hasan the Hunt while simultaneously being like, yeah, look at how much of a coward this at Hasan the Hunt guy is. And I was thinking like, there ain't no way, dog. You just added my actual Twitter account while simultaneously being like, oh yeah, why does he think the Surfs is the leftover podcast? Wait, let me see if I can find that comment. Jank's nephew's content is usually someone else's content. I don't know or care who these spaffs are, lad. They also blocked me a while back. It's a great feeling. No, I didn't. What did you say to Hasan? Amazing what having an impassionate opinion gets you nowadays. You just got to turn the other cheek, mate. That silver spoon millionaire commie is unwittingly boosting you. Such brave men they are. I'm like, what? Not a single person. Not a fucking single person is like being like, dog, that's not him. So HasanAbi for not posting shit about me, having me on block like the fuckboys they are. Looks like I got to a son. Thanks for the shout out, mate. I wouldn't expect anything less from these cowards. You always show yourselves to me. Oh, this is the guy. Yes, thank you. This was the one I saw because, like, this is what broke my brain. Okay? This is what broke my brain. This guy is so stupid. This guy is so fucking stupid. He added me. I wasn't lying. He added me in the fucking comments, but he still thinks I blocked this guy. So the point is that, like, this is what happens when your haters are so fucking stupid. Okay? When your haters are so fucking dumb and their communities are so fucking dumb, it's like they're like, I don't know what to say. It just like becomes really funny. They're like so horny to be like, yeah, fuck Hasan, that they're angry in the comment section about something that didn't happen. And this guy quite literally, he fucking linked me. He knows what my ad is. And he still doesn't get it. But let's get back to the anthrax letters.
Your fallout. Instead of a silent breeze and flash before your eyes, you would watch in horror as those around you rot from the inside out. If you've never heard of anthrax or Bacillus anthracis, it's a dangerously infectious disease caused by a gram-positive bacteria. For reference, gram-negative bacteria are usually more challenging to treat, like pneumonia and meningitis, while gram-positive, like anthrax, require precise antibiotics. It may sound relatively safe, but the CDC categorizes anthrax as a Category A agent, one that poses an immense possible risk towards public health, with the ability to spread over a large area. There's naturally occurring anthrax, and then there's cultivations made by scientists who have molded it into either medicine or a biological weapon. It's believed anthrax originated in Mesopotamia and Egypt, alongside some of humanity's earliest civilizations, beginning with dormant spores that live among the soil. In some cases, anthrax may last years or even decades in the right environment before decaying. Most often, spores get ingested by a person or domesticated animal, a hotbed loaded with sugars and water. These essential ingredients help turn the spore into a growing cell. Once active, the
Sorry, don't mean to be that guy, but pneumonia is usually caused by gram-positive bacteria, not gram-negative like this guy just said. I'll allow it. This is the one time where you're not sorry to be that guy. You never are. But this is the one time where, like, sure, fine. I'll allow it. Usually it's really fucking annoying when someone says, sorry to be that guy, hate to be that guy, because they never hate to be that guy. They love being that guy. And so do you. But this one is valid.
Cells multiply while producing toxins that can cause serious illness and death, though symptoms may vary depending upon the type of exposure. The 4 types of exposure are cutaneous, which affects the skin, bringing about small sores, blisters, and an infamous black ulcer. Gastrointestinal, which affects the digestive system and causes nausea, bloody diarrhea, and high fever. Injection, which affects skin or muscle tissue, leading to redness, swelling, and a group of blisters. Lastly, there is inhalation, arguably the worst way to contract anthrax, with symptoms similar to the flu or common cold. In just a few days, the infected individual will suffer acute breathing problems that get exponentially more serious, landing them.
Hate to be that guy is just a term of speech, not an actual literal phrase. You're being that guy. You should have said hate to be that guy, but hate to be that guy is just a term of speech, not an actual literal phrase. Because you're now, see, that guy is being the hate to be that guy that loves to be that guy and shouldn't be that guy. Okay? You're the guy. Thank you for demonstrating what guy not to be.
In a hospital or an early grave. Luckily, naturally occurring anthrax inhalation is incredibly rare, and when caught, is easily treatable. Some scholars like to believe that historical accounts such as Homer's Iliad and Virgil's poems detail anthrax outbreaks in the ancient world, as well as theorizing that the 5th plague that struck Egypt during the time of Moses was in fact anthrax, described as a sickness affecting livestock.
We should bring it back, honestly. YOLO.
In modern history, the first clinical recordings or accounts of anthrax occurred in 1752 by an unidentified doctor named Moret, and later Nicolas Fournier in 1769. One of the main founders of modern bacteriology, physician Robert Koch, documented the bacteria's ability to spread by spores and the severity of the infection on animals. In severe cases, animals are said to die between 48 and 72 hours, with blood leaking from all orifices. In the 19th century, anthrax earned itself a nickname known as the wool sorter's disease, because cases were appearing frequently in the animal hair industry, although doctors could not pinpoint the organism's origin. In 1881, Louis Pasteur, a French chemist and microbiologist, created the very first anthrax vaccine by using a weakened version of the bacteria. Although
the only problem I have with Phillium videos is that he goes extra ham on like the background of like anthrax or whatever. I wish he would just like, you know, get to the meat of it. You know what I mean?
Intended for cattle, which significantly decreased its transmission to humans. At the same time, governments were beginning to upgrade their chemical arsenal by any means necessary. In a constant bid to compete with other nations' chemical arms, countries stopped at nothing to develop the latest in warfare, with no regard for collateral damage. Around the early 1930s, Japan had shown interest in producing biological weapons, deciding to conduct research in newly occupied Manchuria. Reports indicate the Japanese deliberately infected prisoners of war with anthrax and other deadly diseases, going as far as to attack several Chinese cities with anthrax.
Yeah, so Unit 731, luckily after the war ended, after World War II ended with a peace treaty and a surrender, like a negotiated surrender, without any like nuclear weapons being used on the island, they immediately looked at the research and saw that there was some of the grossest war crimes that anyone had ever committed, like atrocities anyone had ever committed on other human beings. And immediately America was like, we need to destroy these, and we need to make sure that the guys who are responsible for these war crimes are punished. And then they did that. Oh, or the exact opposite of that happened, where America threw an atom bomb too, just the second one just to test it out, and to flex on Russia and show the USSR that we had multiple of these, and then turned around and protected Unit 731 that committed these war crimes, and then used some of the germ warfare research that they actually took from Unit 731 in the Korean War. That's the second thing is what happened.
By spraying them from aircraft. There was also Japan's Operation Cherry Blossoms, a short-lived plan to drop virulent diseases from planes along the United States West Coast in San Diego, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. The crew of the submarine aircraft carriers were even told to infect themselves and run ashore in a kamikaze-like suicide to spread the diseases as much as possible. As technology advanced, beside desperate warfare methods, it was up to scientists to introduce defensive measures against the many forms of chemical attacks. By 1944, just before the end of World War II, penicillin became the primary way to combat anthrax infections and other gram-positive bacteria. The West, specifically the United States, developed their own vaccine in the 50s, with a noted 92.5% effectiveness.
Dude, if anthrax came back, you know motherfuckers are not taking this. Permafrost starts melting. We find like new hidden anthrax. Okay? Scientists immediately rush to update the anthrax vaccine. How many hogs are not taking it? So fucking many. Holy shit.
Need to be replaced in 1970 with an improved version that is still in use today. It may be easy to blame the Japanese and Germans for their use of weaponizing anthrax and other chemical attacks, but the United States and allies were not entirely innocent. And neither is your web browser. Which is why today's video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN. To try it out, go to
I'm showing you his link. Anthrax outbreak triggered by climate change kills boy in Arctic Circle. 72 nomadic herders, including 41 children, were hospitalized in far north Russia after the region began experiencing abnormally high temperatures. There you have it, folks. It's, you know, if it came all the way up to America, hogs would refuse to take a anthrax vaccine, and
surfshark.deals/Philion for 3 extra months for free. That's promo code Philion at surfshark.com. And thank you to Surfshark for sponsoring this video. In 1942, the Allied forces experimented with anthrax to use in bioweapons, with a total of 5,000 anthrax bombs created and ready to be deployed against Germany if provoked. On Gruinard Island, off the coast of Scotland, Great Britain conducted bioweapon research in an effort to observe the widespread release of anthrax on organic matter. In conclusion, the British massacred 80 sheep that were placed on the island and rendered the environment uninhabitable for 46 years. It was becoming more and more apparent just how dangerous anthrax, or at least the weaponized version, truly was. In 1950, during the onset of the Korean War, US troops were inoculated in an effort
Wait, where did they get the anthrax from in 1950 in the Korean War?
To protect them against enemy biological warfare, because such weaponry became increasingly dangerous as countries were continuing to ramp up research and stockpile supplies.
Oh, for the record, they did this because they were the what? Projection. They did this because they were using it. For the I don't know if Philion will talk about it, but we don't know because he skipped the history. No, man, that was like fucking 17th century shit. Shut up. I skipped that part.
In 1969, President Nixon issued an executive order ending the US's bioweapons program. And in 1970,
because he was a fucking commie, dude. Created the EPA, normalized relations with China, okay? Literally fucking ended our biological weapons usage, like, well, ended. But still, What the fuck? Lame ass California Republican. You knew his ass was a commie.
72.
Oh, price checks instituted a price freeze.
Over 100 nations signed a treaty that vowed to destroy present inventory of toxic
Did gas rationing killing car heads? Truly.
material and biological weaponry. Despite the mostly global condemnation of weaponized diseases, the deadliest anthrax attack would occur 7 years after these programs in Sverdlovsk, USSR. Initially, this outbreak was recorded as occurring naturally in livestock. According to the CDC, 96 human infections were recorded, with 79 having gastrointestinal anthrax and 17 having cutaneous anthrax. 64 of the 96 infected died from their illness. When it was time to talk, USSR experts reasserted that it was a natural occurrence, and the anthrax infected the meat that was then eaten. This excuse didn't last long, probably because of the nearby microbiology lab, not far from the site of the reported infections.
Just like COVID, brother.
However, it would take more than 10 years for the truth to finally come out. The president of Russia at the time, Boris Yeltsin, admitted that the outbreak was caused by improper air filters of the Soviet microbiology lab. This epidemic is now known as the largest anthrax inhalation outbreak in history. Under any circumstance, it's clear certain governments spend multi-billions on researching and engineering the latest in biochemistry in order to better understand diseases. In the wrong hands, this research can be used against armies and innocent civilians without concern. On September 18th, 2001, a week after 9/11, 2 letters were placed in a mailbox in Trenton, New Jersey, sent to Tom Brokaw at NBC News and to the New York Post, both located in New York City. 3 weeks later, 2 more letters postmarked October 9th, 2001 were mailed to Senators Thomas Dashley and Patrick Leahy at their Washington, D.C. offices. A 5th letter is believed to have arrived at American Media, located in Boca Raton, Florida. Considering the reports of an outbreak at the facility, yet no letter was ever found. They were white, photocopied pieces of paper with an irregular shape. The first letters contained a coarse, low-grade anthrax powder that was brown in color. This is typical when the chemist or perpetrator in question is most likely a mad scientist in his garage. However, the second round of letters contained a near-perfect form of anthrax, a gas-like substance making it deadly and highly volatile, indicating the work of a seasoned microbiologist. There are 2 possible explanations for the differences in quality of the anthrax. 1, the attacker wanted to purposely throw off investigators, or 2, the attacker perfected their formulation of anthrax. The anthrax spores would spiral into the air from the ripping of the letter, infecting anyone who breathed them. The New York Post and Brokaw letters were identically handwritten to the letters received by Senators Dashley and Leahy. In total, 22 victims contracted anthrax as a result of the mailings, although the DOJ's investigative summary includes another 31 who tested positive for exposure to anthrax spores, as well as 10,000 more people who were deemed at risk from possible exposure and were given antibiotics as a precaution. Of the 22, 11 contracted inhalation anthrax by inhaling the spores. The other 11 suffered from cutaneous anthrax by absorbing it through their skin. 5 of the inhalation.
This is how hog cops think they'll get fucking poisoned by fentanyl.
Victims died from their infections. Thomas Morris, Joseph P. Kursine, Kathy T. Nguyen, Ottilie Lundgren, and lastly, Robert Stevens, who was the first recorded individual to be infected and died shortly after by contracting pulmonary anthrax, leading to the immediate creation of a joint task force between the FBI and USPIS. To find the perpetrator behind these attacks, the Amerithrax Task Force devoted 600,000 hours to investigative work, 10,000 witness interviews spanning 6 continents, 80 executed search warrants, 6,000 items of potential evidence, 5,750 grand jury subpoenas, and 5,730 environmental samples taken from 60 different locations. The task force filtered the evidence down to 48 post offices and 625 individual street mailboxes around Trenton, New Jersey, from which the anthrax letters were believed to have been mailed from. After testing each mailbox, they finally found the specific blue street side box, located near Princeton University, which came back positive for anthrax contamination. At the same time, the anthrax contained within the letters was closely examined to figure out its origin.
Yeah, where could it have come from?
And commercial universities assisted the FBI using resourceful techniques, including scanning electron microscopy to find the source. The task force immediately began looking into scientists, especially those at the United States Army Medical Research Institute of Infectious Diseases, or USAMRID, to determine if anyone had any dirty laundry. It was first believed that Dr. Stephen J. Hatfill was the suspect, as numerous individuals called the FBI, suspecting him as the killer. It was also noted that he filed multiple prescriptions for Cipro around 2001, the only FDA-approved drug to treat inhalation anthrax. On another note, Dr. Hatfill created an unpublished book which involved a determined terrorist stalking Washington with a brave American researcher devoted to stopping a biodisaster. None of the hearsay or coincidences could be linked to Hatfill being the one behind the 2001 anthrax attacks. Authorities had to dig deeper, finding an old report dated from February 1999, in which Hatfill summarized the possibilities of terrorist anthrax mailings. The report was seen as a blueprint for the 2001 attacks, as it even detailed the maximum amount of anthrax powder, 2.5 grams, to use without creating a suspicious bulge. The amount used in the letters was 0.871 grams. Not long after, the media and authorities were calling Hatfill the killer. It would take another 6 years for the most crucial evidence towards the case to arrive. Microbiologists discovered the specific strain of anthrax used in the letters known as Ames, which was created from flask RMR 1029, stored in a USAMRID lab at Fort Detrick. This is when the investigation switched focus to only those with unrestricted access to the RMR flask.
What? Dude, how... I mean, hopefully nothing bad happens to the samples so that, like, they can adequately test it, right? To see where it was, where it was coming from. You know what I mean?
Hatfill would be exonerated in 2008 and awarded $5.8 million because he didn't have access to the certain suites at USAMRID. The task force had the wrong guy, but they weren't far off. By searching work computers, phones, and emails within the Fort Detrick laboratory, they found—
So for 6 years, the entire country blamed one guy and literally no one cared to learn the updated news?
Potential evidence against a new possible suspect, Dr. Bruce Ivins, a senior biosecurity researcher. Bruce Ivins was born in Lebanon, Ohio in 1946. He was the youngest of 3 brothers and admired his father, a pharmacist who owned a local drugstore. According to Charles, one of Bruce's older brothers, their mother was extremely violent and abusive during their childhood. He recalled a time when his mother threw herself down a flight of stairs while pregnant with Bruce, who she wanted to abort. It's obvious why Bruce followed in his father's footsteps,
Lebanon, Ohio,
with science in school. Subtle foreshadowing came in the form of his senior thesis, a dissertation on the toxicity of disease-causing bacteria. Bruce was an undoubtedly skilled scientist for 36 years, 18 of which were at the Fort Detrick facility in Maryland. After news of the 1979 Sverdlovsk anthrax outbreak, Bruce, who had been concerned with Legionella, cholera, and chlamydia, turned his attention to anthrax. So much so that in 2003, Bruce became co-creator of 2 US patents for anthrax vaccine technology. Decades of hard work would be thrown away once Bruce was suspected as being a possible culprit. He had all the skills necessary to carry out the attacks, being an expert scientist for almost 40 years. He worked in the biodefense lab at Fort Detrick, the known location of the RMR 1029 flask. By 2007, the clues were lining up to Bruce. The Amerithrax task force had a new prime suspect. It was only a matter of time before authorities would find irrefutable evidence implicating Bruce in the 2001 attacks. They installed a GPS tracker on his car and began to regularly search his trash. On November 1st, 2007, law enforcement executed a search warrant of his home, collecting valuable evidence for their investigation. First was a collection of letters sent to Congress and media, that which held similarities to the anthrax letters. There were also 3 handguns, 2 stun guns, a taser, electronic detection devices, and apparent spying software. Either Bruce was readying for another attack or expecting the zombie apocalypse, because he was also using his basement as a makeshift firing range. As time passed and the evidence was organized, Bruce became the only suspect. I mean, who else could it be? Bruce liked to take...
Yeah. Well, you know, good thing we have all the answers, right? Certainly nothing will happen to Bruce that will you know, stop this investigation. I mean, we'll be able to find out after the top of the hour ad break is over, or just kidding, will I paywall it with the top of the hour ad break, urging you to subscribe so you know the actual answers to what will happen. Subscribers will know because they won't get paywalled for 3 minutes. Whereas at the top of the hour, there's a 3-minute ad break. And if you're not subscribed, you will see the ad. Instead, here's the 3-minute ad break now.
Long drives without telling his wife so that he can go and deliver letters from distant post offices. The FBI also claims he used a pseudonym while doing so, thereby disguising the mailer's identity. Bruce also lived within close proximity to the source of the anthrax envelopes, which were sold in Frederick, Maryland, used in the 2001 attacks. Apparent motives were found in his personal emails, and he was facing professional pressure from his anthrax vaccine being pulled from the market. Bruce began to show clear signs of struggle with mental health issues, which were said to have been revealed ever since his college years. Bruce was unstable by all accounts. Psychiatrists described him as homicidal and sociopathic, with clear intentions. He had a history of posting death threats to a reality TV star, while threatening violence and planning revenge on those who disparaged him. He was guilty of extreme workplace negligence, having to secretly decontaminate 2 areas, a junior lab tech's desk and his own work quarters. Bruce chose not to report either events. The language used in the letters, at first glance, was attributed to Al-Qaeda, but when you're dealing with the FBI, they like to check things twice. First,
Do they? Because, like, they literally ran with the narrative that it was probably Al-Qaeda. And then they found another random guy and said he was the one for 6 fucking years. So, not really. I don't think they were too competent on this. But to be fair, a lot of people always ask me, like, Hasan, what's the conspiracy theory that you believe that is a conspiracy theory that you think is real, but, like, you know, there is at least some evidence that it might not be? It's this one. Okay? Was this dude working at Fort Detrick, working or operating at the behest of the federal government in an effort to create a fear-mongering campaign that would strike at the core, at the heart of the American citizens, thinking that, you know, they're going to send any and every fucking person with a goddamn mailbox a anthrax-laced letter, okay? Or he just happened to be a crazy dude, perfect place, perfect time. Okay, crazy guy who just did this shit. Or a third option, that crazy guy that was capable of doing some shit like that, nudged in a specific direction, and then they took their sweet-ass time with the investigation because it, again, freaked Americans out and basically universalized the 9/11 experience, like the fear of 9/11 for everywhere, for Americans all around the country.
First, all of the letters featured the date 09/11/01. The text indicated some form of Islamic terrorism, along with instances of the letters A and T being bolded. When the letters were separated, investigators got the following message: TTT, AAT, TAT. Triple T equals phenylalanine, and its single letter designator is F. AAT is asparagine, and its single letter designator is N. TAT is tyrosine, which has the single letter designator of Y. Two messages were taken from this: PAT, the nickname of a former colleague, Patricia Warsham, and FNY, fuck New York. According to the Fed's witness testimony, Ivins was a well-known critic of New York. It also just so happens that Bruce was interested in secret codes, owning at least one book dedicated to cryptology. A week before his planned arrest, Bruce threw out the cryptology book and came back outside at 1 a.m. to confirm his trash had been picked up. If convicted of the crimes mounting against him, Bruce could have faced the death penalty. His options to escape this alive were becoming more desperate. He tried to shift blame to other colleagues and even emailed himself, forging a story about why his former peers likely committed the anthrax attacks. By far the strangest behavior exhibited by Bruce was his frequent road trips alone to the Kappa Kappa Gamma sorority in Princeton. In his own words, he would lie to his wife, drive 3 hours to the sorority, and sit outside in his car for roughly 10 minutes. After whatever activity Bruce was performing, he would silently drive 3 hours back home. Who knows how many times Bruce did this, but one thing is for certain: he burglarized the sorority on 2 separate occasions, stealing items pertaining to the sorority's ritual. There was simply no explaining this deranged behavior, or the overtime he was clocking at work in the days preceding the anthrax mailing. Early on in the investigation, when Bruce wasn't the prime suspect, he was asked by the FBI to provide samples for RMR 1029. According to investigators, they claimed he provided questionable agents to potentially distract authorities. At this point, there was more than enough evidence to arrest Bruce Ivins as the sole culprit behind the anthrax letters. In 2008, Bruce was involuntarily admitted to a psychiatric hospital as the law enforcement investigation left a toll on his mental health. When asked about the anthrax attacks, Bruce admitted to the FBI he had memory loss and would wake up dressed and wondered if he had gone out that night. Upon returning home and subsequently informed of his impending prosecution, Bruce was found unconscious at his home on July 27, 2008. He died 2 days later of what was recorded as an overdose from a mixture of Tylenol and codeine. This was later amended to death by liver and kidney failure, following the consumption of 2 bottles of Tylenol PM, 8 days after Bruce's.
Well, guess we'll never be able to find out what actually full-blown happened. I mean,
death. U.S. Attorney Jeffrey Taylor released a statement claiming Ivins was the one responsible for the 2001 attacks. The reasons included the fact that he had immunized himself to anthrax, was one of hundreds of scientists with accessibility to the sole strain, and sought to gain from an anthrax epidemic, considering his vaccine patents. Bruce's death brought some closure to the investigation, but there would have to have been more done if people were going to feel safe. The contamination and cleanup of over dozens of buildings had cost taxpayers a staggering $1 billion to decontaminate. If there was to be an end to the panic, legislation was necessary to combat any possibility of a future attack, be it domestic or foreign. A compromise was reached, and before most of America knew.
Yeah. You get an anthrax vaccine. I feel like it fucks you up, right? You get an anthrax vaccine when you join the military, along with many other vaccines, including COVID, which is pretty funny because some of those shots are genuinely fucked up. The ones they give you. which makes the COVID thing laughable, extra laughable.
Knew it. The Judiciary Committee signed the Patriot Act into law. The sad reality is, the death of Bruce Ivins, bipartisan legislation, and a war against terrorism didn't stop biological weapons from being used against the innocent. Another chemical attack struck the United States in 2003, when an unknown individual, going by the name Fallen Angel, released 2 ricin letters. One was sent to the White House, but intercepted at a processing facility. The other was found in South Carolina. Fallen Angel was never found, yet in the letters, they explained to authorities their ownership.
If you change the hours of service on January 4th, I will turn DC into a ghost town. The powder and the letter is ricin. Have a nice day, Fallen. What?
Of a trucking company, and expressed anger over the changes to some federal trucking regulations. To date, the $100,000 reward for finding Fallen Angel remains. Fallen Angel's letter was followed up with another in 2004, when a white powdery substance found in the mailroom of Senate Majority Leader Bill Frist tested positive for ricin. Almost 10 years later, in 2013, another 2 ricin letters were found, one addressed to Senator Roger Wicker and one for President Barack Obama. These letters were also intercepted, and the perpetrator was eventually found. James Everett Dutchke, a man from Mississippi, who was sentenced to 25 years in prison. One of the previous ricin letters was never tied to anyone, showing just how difficult it is to pinpoint a suspect in biological attacks, especially the right one. In stark contrast to the FBI's case against Ivins, PBS Frontline, McClatchy, and ProPublica launched an investigation that paints a different picture. With years to look over the FBI's claims, these sources state that there would have been a significant amount of doubt against their anthrax suspect. The FBI was convinced that they had their guy. After all, he was a total weirdo who exhibited near psychopathic behavior and devoted a portion of his life to studying anthrax. It had to have been him. The fact remains, Ivins never had a chance to defend himself in a court of law.
It's crazy that it's just like, you know, it's crazy. Surely, I mean, listen, when you just fucking die like that.
The biggest discrepancy between the FBI's account and ProPublica's is Ivan's deception of law enforcement. On one hand, the FBI claims that he sent them shoddy samples of anthrax spores for testing. They disclosed 2 potential samples that he provided. In reality, he sent them 4, 3 of which had the identical biomarkers known as morphs, which would indicate that the anthrax spores came from his flask RMR 1029. This proves that if Ivins was in fact the bioterrorist, he wasn't trying to cover his tracks, as he sent them spores that actually matched the anthrax strain in the letters. In other words, if Ivins was the killer, he just gave them the murder weapon.
Like, the question is, why would he willingly why would he cooperate with the FBI willingly if he's the one who fucking actually committed these crimes, right? And if he was also openly committing these crimes and wanted to be caught, and that's why he gave this information to FBI, why did he write that he, you know, death to Israel, death to America, hail Al-Qaeda, or whatever the fuck he wrote? You know what I mean? Why would he do that?
Over the course of the FBI's investigation, Ivins worked hand in hand with law enforcement to try and find the source of the anthrax. He wasn't the only one with access to RMR 1029. Additionally, the FBI could not prove that Ivins was capable of creating dry anthrax powder from wet anthrax suspensions, which were typical at Fort Detrick's lab, or the fact that he allegedly created the coded message of Islamic rhetoric. They could only speculate that he had the opportunity to do so. Looking back, it's easy to identify the FBI lied or conveniently didn't disclose the full scope of their investigation. If anything,
This came out after 3 years after his untimely demise, for the record, as Fillion points out. This is the ProPublica article. FBI and Justice Department investigators say the Army microbiologist submitted a deceptive sample of anthrax to cover up his role as a perpetrator of the 2001 anthrax letter attacks. Turns out that's not the case. Records found by PBS Frontline show Ivins made available 3 other samples of spores, each of which match those used in the letters. Which doesn't make sense.
The bureaucratic investigators in charge of prosecuting the anthrax attacker overstated their certainty. Was it Hatfill or Ivins all along? Did an unknown third suspect escape justice? When it comes to the truth, we may never know. We can only decide who to trust.
Many of Ivan's former colleagues, by the way, even though he's weird, at the Germ Research Center in Fort Detrick, where they worked, his investigation tested Dugway material and other spores in his inventory, is among numerous indications that the FBI got the wrong man. What kind of murderer, they wonder, would ask the cops to test his own gun for ballistics? The prosecutors who later branded Ivins the killer in a lengthy report. His solicitous email is trumped by a long chain of evidence, much of it circumstantial, that they say would have convinced the jury that he prepared the lethal powder right there under the noses of some of the nation's foremost biodefense scientists. They conducted dozens of interviews, reviewed thousands of pages of FBI files. Much of the case remains unchallenged, notably finding that the anthrax letters were mailed from Princeton, New Jersey, just steps from an office of the cause sorority that Ivins was obsessed with for much of his adult life. But newly available documents and the accounts of Ivins' former colleagues shed fresh light on the evidence, and while they don't exonerate Ivins, are at odds with some of the science and circumstantial evidence that the government said would have convicted him of capital crimes. While the prosecutors continue to vehemently defend their case, even some of government science consultants wonder whether the real killer is still at large. Prosecutor said he tried to hide his guilt. They lied about that. Paul Kemp, who was Ivan's lawyer, said the government never told him about the 2 of the samples discovery called incredible. The fact that the FBI had multiple samples of Ivan's spores that genetically matched anthrax in the letters, Kemp said, debunks the charge that the biologist was trying to cover up his tracks. What I don't understand is, like, why would the FBI... why would the FBI just simply not say that he didn't try to fucking interfere with the investigation? It was him, and he leaked it. You can get into the weeds, and you can take little shots of each aspects of our vast, mosaic of evidence against Dr. Ivins, she said in an interview, but in a trial, she said prosecutors would have urged jurors to see the big picture. Scientists who work for the FBI's case do not all share her creativity. Claire Fraser-Liggett, a genetics consultant who provided some of the most important evidence linking Ivins to the attack powder, said she would have voted to acquit. I don't know how it could have been possible to convict him, said Fraser-Liggett, the director of the University of Maryland's Institute of Genome Sciences. Should he have had access to a potential bioweapon given everything that's come to light? I'd say no. Was he totally just off the wall from everything I've seen and read? I'd say yes. But that doesn't mean somebody's a cold-blooded killer. The Justice Department formally closed the anthrax case last year in identifying Ivins as the perpetrator. Prosecutors pointed to his deceptions, his shifting explanations, his obsessions with sorority and former lab technician, his penchant for taking long drives to mail letters under pseudonyms from distant post offices after he fell into drinking and depression with the FBI closing in, his violent threats during group therapy sessions, an FBI search of his home before he died turned up a cache of guns and ammunition. Most of all, prosecutors cited the genetics test as conclusive evidence. Yet the FBI never could prove that Ivins manufactured the dry powder from the type of wet anthrax suspensions used at Fort Detrick. It couldn't prove that he scrawled letters mimicking the hateful rhetoric of Islamic terrorists. And it couldn't prove that he twice slipped away to Princeton to mail letters to the news media outlets and 2 U.S. senators. It could prove only he had an opportunity to do so undetected. So, yeah, it's like one of those very weird, mysterious situations where he's like a weird guy, and it could have been him, but there's no, there's no real evidence beyond fucked vibes. And also on top of that, the government literally just had the wrong guy for 5 years. They just like falsely claimed the wrong guy was responsible for this, whose vibes were also fucked in some ways. So just remember that. They were like, oh, well, the details of the first guy's situation was also circumstantial and kind of fucked.